Welcome to the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast with psychologist Dr. Doreen Downing. Listen in as Doreen interviews people who felt they didn't have a voice or who suffered extreme speaking anxiety. You'll hear stories about how they struggled to speak up, what they did to find their authentic voice, and the confidence they now feel to speak up and make an impact. If you want to get started right away to find your voice, download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. And now, here is Doreen.
Hi, this is Dr. Doreen Downing, host of the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast. And I have a special guest today. All my guests are special, but when you've been through many journeys with one of them, it just feels like you are very close and dear-hearted to one. And that's who my friend is today, Linda Graf. Hi, Linda.
Hello, Doreen.
I'm going to briefly introduce you. Linda Graf is a relationship and mental fitness coach who's been coaching and leading workshops for 20 plus years. Linda helps women 45 plus open to the possibility of their most important relationships and what that can be, providing them with step-by-step tools and practices so they can make it happen. And the it is what we're talking about today, right? A better life. What would you say the it is?
Better relationships.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a better life, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we come in wanting relationship from the moment we're born, really drawn, and nobody teaches us how. So.
Yeah. Oh, already I'm getting little goosebumps. I mean, just listening to you, I know that the audience, hello, guests and listeners today, you're in for a treat because Linda and I have a similar wavelength. And if you've already been attracted to my podcast and who I am, you'll certainly be awed. I mean, like what she just said, I think is already profound. Hey, yeah, we don't come in knowing, but we are already a knower. We're bringing that in, and it's what we want.
Yeah.
So, hi, Linda.
Hi.
Let's just get rolling here. I always start with you not having a voice somewhere along the line in your life, because this is about voice, right? And I think we do come in with the goo goo gaga, as Lee Glickstein says, right? But something happens. So if we could just focus on you and a reflection that comes to you about the difficulty, if you had one, maybe not, of having a voice early on in life.
Yeah. Well, it was really interesting, Doreen, when we decided to do this podcast together. I actually really thought about it. It's been a while, but I had a great, very fortunate childhood and just lucky, very lucky. And then in my teenage years, things really changed in my family. In my early years in grammar school, I actually won speech contests and got to speak in front of the whole school. It was pretty crazy, and I was fine. And then when I was 15, my dad went through some financial crisis and everything got pulled away. It was like the whole bottom of my earth disappeared.
Yeah.
My ballet lessons, my piano lessons, I was a pretty spoiled kid. Everything just changed overnight, and no fault of his. It just was a really challenging time. So I lost that parent support at a time. And I think, as I've been thinking about it, I think that's what it was. But I suddenly became very aware and vulnerable, I think, I have to step into the world and take care of myself. See, I'm getting right now. So I learned quickly that I could not speak in front of groups anymore. I couldn't even speak in front of 6 people without getting like this, getting really contracted. Yeah, it was hard. It was really hard. So I think that's when it started.
Thank
Puberty.
you. Yeah. Puberty. Yeah. Thank you. I relate, actually. I won contests when I was in eighth grade, I guess, and was school spirit commissioner during high school. And it didn't really occur to me till much later. So I can relate to what you're saying is feeling pretty comfortable being a little girl, and then something happens. And my story isn't what we're talking about today, but I just want to say, even I think what I want the listeners to hear is that even if you've had what you look back on and appreciate an early childhood, there's somewhere, if you have anxiety now in your life about speaking up, somewhere along the line, there's been a twist. Something happened, and that's what my work is about, is getting curious about it. Let's just get curious about what happened. So thank you. And then what I also felt was like, okay, you've got a frame, and all of a sudden there's no frame.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how did that feel?
Well, I didn't realize it even until I got asked to speak. I was in sales and I got asked to speak on a panel of 6 people. And I had the quivering face and I just sweaty palms and I couldn't even think. And it was just a conversation. And I realized, oh, there's something going on here. Yeah.
Oh,
That was probably in my 20s or mid 20s. Yeah.
wow. Yeah, just how we journey through life with who we are, and then it pops up in a certain situation, and we're confronted with the fact that fear has, just me saying it, kind of fear has taken hold.
Yes. Yeah. It does that. It just,
Yeah, the feeling of it. And that's what I hear from folks, is that it does feel like it's hijacked, as a word I hear a lot.
that's
But
exactly how it feels. And you can think, oh, I can prepare for this, I can prepare for this, but you can't. It just happens.
uh-huh.
So I was really lucky. Well, a couple things happened in my career. I could just see, I didn't know where I was going. I was in sales, I was running my business, and I was starting to complete that business. Something was calling me to do more, which turned out to be coaching. But along that little interim journey, I just kept feeling like I need to face this problem. I never thought of seeing myself on stage or in front of groups of people or running workshops, but there was something pulling me and saying, you got to deal with this. This is going to hold you back in some level. And it wasn't even a mental thing. It was more like a emotional. I just knew I had to deal with something was calling.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then one of my really dear friends was getting married, and she had a total freak out about getting up in front of her friends and family and saying her vows.
Uh-huh.
But she was again pulled more committed to expressing herself in an authentic, beautiful way in front of people and her fiance, her new soon to be husband, that she was courageous enough to go find help. And guess who she found? Speaking circles and Lee and you and the whole group. And
Uh-huh.
she told me about her. Well, one, I saw her get married and it was absolutely stunningly authentic and beautiful.
Ooh, yeah, yeah.
So I knew she had learned something. And so that's what brought me to speaking circles and doing some work with a couple of facilitators before I met you and Lee a couple of years later. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Well, it's interesting too for listeners who have events coming up, that there is help for you right away, so that you don't have to rehearse hundreds of times and sweat, or drink a half a whatever you drink to get yourself prepared. But I would say that there was somebody who, one of my clients, came in February because he was getting married and knew he had to give his vows in September, and he was already worried. So of course we worked, and I wasn't able to go to the wedding, but I know that they're still very happily married with two little children. So
Um,
it had to be successful.
Yeah. But isn't it's so interesting to me to see what and hear what compels people
Mm.
to move forward. And you have thousands of stories because you've worked with so many people. What are some of the themes that compels people to move forward?
Well, yes, events like that, where the fright shows up. And then the other is what you mentioned, is that all of a sudden it happens to you. Your body goes into a state of panic and you don't understand why. And it seems like that's never happened before, but why this time? And what that does is it's like it becomes a little mini trauma. And
Mm.
because it happened once, you know something's well, you don't know, but you think or you imagine that it's going to happen again. So
Yeah.
that's another reason. And then, of course, career advancement, where they know that the next level involves leading meetings or doing presentations, and they want it, but they know or they feel they can't do it. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. And
and,
there's something too I know about people I've worked with and you.
uh-huh.
I mean, it's not just career, it's more like purpose. It's like people want to share their story in some way.
Um,
And to be able to share your story to more than one person at a time is powerful. When you start to see the impact of that. So
I'm
do you,
so glad you brought that one up. The inner kind of the not just some external circumstance, but what's going on inside of you, not just the calling, but the destiny that feels like, well, that is the calling, but that
yeah,
that there's something more for you, and you have a sense of it, and that's it's potential. Somehow you know
yeah,
you have potential and you want to manifest more of that. And then the second part of what you just said was story.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things.
Well,
Yes, the
I,
story, the destiny in the story. So to be able to share that with people is huge.
I'm going to go off course just a minute here because I know, and I've been at some of your events. Could you just say, I don't think you're doing them currently, but you may get back to them.
I
Tell me.
may get back to
Oh,
them. I kind of got swerved up. They're called Tiny Talks events, and they're teeny tiny TED Talks. And the whole reason I started doing these community events, I've done 6 of them now, both in Montana and California. But I moved to Montana and I love stories and I wanted to know my community. So I came up with this. I woke up one morning and had this idea. Why not put on an event where I bring people from different factions of the community, people who don't usually talk to each other, to share a little teeny tiny story about them. And then they would bring their audience and then we'd all mingle afterwards. So that's the community building part. But it also gave people a chance to share what was important to them. But I kept them short, like 8 minutes. And so if someone was bored with the with that story, we just move on to the next one. But it turned out to be really successful. The first one in Montana in the winter there were 125 people that showed up. So for me, that was quite successful. And I met so many great people. And as I was cultivating and curating the speakers and helping them tune into what mattered most to them,
yeah.
I got to meet so many great people. So
Uh-huh.
it was selfish on my part, but also fun for the presenters and fun for the audience. And I
Yeah.
love doing it. Anybody out there want to help me do another one? It takes some work, but they're really, really fun.
Yes. Yeah. I've been there, and I can attest to the not just the fun, but it's so human. People get up and tell their stories in front of others, and I would say that you said selfish. I feel like my podcast is a little selfish because I get to spend time with you like this, and it's more than just us having coffee. It feels like we get to be serving at the same time. We're learning about each other. We're talking about ourselves, but we're also providing a service for our listeners who could be struggling and want to hear stories about how people found their voice. And so let's move on to that now.
Okay.
And you mentioned speaking circles and Lee Glickstein, and having started to listen to something inside of you that said, there's more and I need help, basically, is what you said. You can't do it alone.
You cannot do it alone. Yeah, that the suite. I'm sure your audience knows about speaking circles, but the space of speaking circles is really not about speaking. It's about listening. And to me, that was such a turning point, as well as learning that I can speak to one person at a time. And if I was really good at it and I knew that, I was solid in that. And then I just learned to speak to one person at a time in a larger audience and have a relationship with them one at a time. And there was something magical, just like right now, what we're having, Doreen, there's something magical and rich and rewarding and fun about being present with another human being. And that's what speaking circles taught me, as well as how to listen. And so the gift in meeting you folks and taking that work forward has been really tuning in, not just to learning to listen to audience, but because I do more and more work in relationship coaching, it's giving people the opportunity to learn how to tune into themselves, especially during conflict situations, and then get curious, be compassionate, and be courageous enough to put aside their judgment, belief, opinion, and listen to the other person. And then that's where the conflict opens up. So you all taught me that.
Well, I'm going to ask you way more questions about what you just said. I have plenty. And what's interesting, the masterclass that I do is about face, embrace, and replace fear. And those are the 3 C's I also use is curiosity, compassion, and courage.
Oh, wow.
And I just went, oh, did she take my masterclass?
I missed that one. I've done some of yours, but I missed that one.
Yeah, no, but it feels like, it comes together, the process of coming closer to ourselves when we're afraid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And having this is where the practice comes in. And it's not like super duper, you got to sit for months and months kind of practice, but little bitty practices every day, a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Builds that mental muscle to be able to stop, notice, pause, take that profound pause before we blurt something we will regret later, or stir the pot even more. So practice is really important too. And then having the compassion in that for whatever you're going through and whatever the other person's going through. Yeah.
Great. Well, I'll be right back, or we will be right back.
Okay.
If you want to get started right away to find your voice, download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com.
Hi, this is Dr. Doreen Downing again, back with my friend Linda Graf, and we're talking about finding your voice, her own experience somewhere around teenage, to have a whole rug pulled out experience in her life, and that destabilized her in such a way that she thinks that might have been the first place where she lost her voice. And then it didn't occur to her until maybe 10 years later that, there's something not easy about speaking in front of others. And that's what we've been talking about, is how to get more comfortable speaking, being yourself, not just speaking, but being yourself, so that then the speaking comes from a more true place inside of you. And Linda did some work with my training partner, Lee Glickstein, and I many years ago, and it feels like she has found her voice, is a relationship coach now. And we were just talking about how this work, this listening that you learn in the process of being more expressed. It's not so much about speaking, it's about listening is the whole point, and listening to one person at a time. And so, Linda, you do relationship coaching, and you set a container, and you're talking about listening to people who aren't listening to each other. What happens in that circumstance? How do you help?
How do I help?
Yes.
Well, I think first of all, I help them. Well, I work with a program that instantly shows you the kinds of negative thinking that show up when you're triggered. And they could be things like turning to patterns of behavior, like being a victim, or patterns of behavior controlling, or patterns of being hypervigilant. There's these several patterns that you can assess yourself on. And once you know them,
yes,
once you name them, you can tame them. And so
Oh,
that's the first thing I do with people that I work with is if they're willing and open to this, is have them take this assessment so they know when they show up. And then over a very short period of time, I take them through a 12-week program where the first section of it is learning these techniques of how to notice, stop, and shift, and getting to know your saboteurs is what we call them, and then finding the strength in those saboteurs, because those saboteurs aren't the saboteur behaviors are really coming from places when we were young that helped us. Like for me, I think my controller is one of my strongest saboteurs. And when I was at that 15-year-old, 16-year-old stage, I had to take care of myself. I was out on my own. And so I just took control of the situation and it really helped me. And controlling and building my businesses over the years has really helped me. When they are out of control, when I'm triggered, I tend to like jump on situations and like, I'll just do it. I'll take care of that website. I'll just do it because it's faster. And so I move into this very grabbing hold. And what that does, the hurt of it is it pushes people away. So in my close personal relationships, if I do that, it pushes my partner away or my girlfriends away or whoever I'm in relationship with is if I move too fast and try to grab on. So I've learned, this is so cool. I've learned when you really tune in, when my controller shows up, I have learned that my body, my right shoulder starts to go forward. It's kind of like I want to grab. So now I can feel it, notice it, and stop and go, no, 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 no. Just take a breath. So I teach my clients this. What is the saboteur that your go-to? And then we learn together how they can both learn from it and also manage it.
I love the idea that it's embodied and that you've discovered the embodiment for yourself. And I'm going to take that thought because I know that one of my roots was 5 years old when my grandma told my sister and me to be quiet when my mother was depressed and she was in and out of the hospital. And grandma said, don't say anything. Don't disturb your mother. She's going to get sick. So I think there was a kind of like, I got to stop, kind of I better not. And so I'm trying to, that sense of shoulders tightening and look at my fingers.
I know. I was just going, you're like,
yeah. So I'm going to take that idea of how I embodied that, shut up or else kind of experience.
yeah, it's like, ouch, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's now we're at compassion. Yeah. Just the hand over the heart and say, I wasn't there for you, little one. I'm here for you now. And if we're talking to, parts, the one that was hurt and the one that's doing the hello in there is the sage, right?
Yeah. And we all have that. To me, as I said, right when we started the conversation today, we come in wanting relationship. It's not that our parents are bad. Maybe some of them are, but mostly not. They're just doing the best they can. They didn't have operating instructions. Yeah. No one really told them unless you're very, very lucky. And it's usually generational. So, they're doing their best they can. And what happens, I think we come in as these beautiful little beings, and then we get plastered with stuff. There's that wonderful story about the golden Buddha. I think it was in Bhutan where they had this gorgeous gold Buddha in the village, and this army was coming through that was going to take everything down. So they covered this gold Buddha up with plaster and made it dirty and ugly, and it disappeared, and nobody touched it. Until years later, somebody was noticing that they were wiping it down, that there was a little shiny spot underneath there. And, the story goes, they cleaned it all off, and the golden Buddha shows through and its brightness. And I feel like that's what would happen to us as children. Not because anybody did bad things to us. We were moving through life. Sometimes it's your parents. Sometimes it's a nasty kid at school or a teacher.
Yeah.
And on the playground or whatever, something happens and we start piling on the plaster.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about, this relational presence, and what you teach is about how to start taking the plaster off
Yeah.
so we can drop in and let our real presence shine through.
Knowing that the real presence is in there is key, I think. And what you just did, this taking the plaster off, and what you did was just kind of an unfolding as opposed to a chipping away or just kind of like the kind of struggle, because I think that moving towards, I mean, all that crust needs embracing too. It needs, oh, thank you for protecting me
Yeah,
idea, right?
absolutely. That's so true. Yeah, I love what you were saying. I didn't even notice it, but it is kind of like a rubbing off
Uh-huh.
as opposed to like,
Yeah.
that doesn't work.
Ouch.
Yeah. Well, there's the compassion too. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh.
But we all have it. This is the cool thing, I mean, for me, in speaking in front of people now, it's like amazing to me that I still get nervous. It's not like that, but I can deal with it. I not deal with it. I can move into enjoying it more.
Uh-huh.
I still have little thoughts that pop in and like, oh my God.
Uh-huh. I
But
do too, Linda.
yeah.
I do too. I do not like lives. I mean, I love doing podcasts, but I mean, here I am with myself in a camera in front of me. It's not a human being.
Mm.
And so what I usually do is put a pair of eyes by the camera so that I feel like I'm relating to somebody.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, doing webinars where you're the only one and there's no audience is horrible.
Right.
I actually had stuffed animals at one time on top of my
Yes.
computer
Yeah.
just to make me laugh. It was like somebody's there.
Yes. Yes. I so understand. Oh, well, I feel like I could go on for the rest of the day having conversation with you. So let's come to I know you do the work, the positive psychology and the positive intelligence work. And you touched on it a little bit earlier about techniques, and it could be just a few minutes. So share a good technique about, especially related to fear and finding your voice.
So it's pretty simple. It's very similar to what you teach. I believe the body is the gym. I see the body as a gym. So, and what I mean is that any sensate experience you can have, whether it's smell, touch, visual, even taste, like you can take a glass and bring your attention just right now in this moment. If you're anyone in your audience has got a cup of tea or something, put your hands on it and really feel the coolness or warmth, or maybe rub your fingertips on it and feel the smoothness or texture of it. And here's a really great tactile thing to do. You can take 2 fingers and bring your attention as gently as you can to the ridges of your fingertips. And maybe even close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing that, just for a moment. And really feel the texture. And then take one hand and take your fingertips and just rub against the inside of the other. And really bring your attention there.
Uh-huh.
And
And
that's
what that just did to me is I felt like my moment expanded. I'm always with you, but I'm with you and I'm in this bigger moment, it felt like.
that's beautiful. Yeah. So you can do this anytime. You can do it in a conference room.
Mm-hmm.
If you're feeling nervous about speaking and you know you have something to say, before you speak, just rub, take your attention. And what it does is it settles you into yourself
Mm-hmm.
and quiets the mind, just brings you back into the body. Or you could feel your feet on the floor.
I'll do that right now.
And my favorite, one of my favorite, I love the touch one. If you listen with your ears, just to what is the farthest away sound you can hear right now?
Mm-hmm.
And then what's the closest sound you can hear right now?
Yeah.
And if you get really quiet, you might even be able to feel your breath and hear your breath. I could hear your breath.
Yeah.
Even through the
Everyone, you just heard my breath.
So those things, play with them. I invite your audience to play with those very simple things, whether it's sound or touch, to see what it does to your system, your body.
Right.
And if it brings you into present, because people always say, oh, just be present in front of a group. And it's like,
Right.
sounds good. How do I do that? Well,
The
this is one
how.
way.
And the how, and do it quickly, especially if your heart is starting to beat so fast that you can't control it. So I love it. I love the pattern interrupt, and purposefully not having to, purposely being able to do it in minutes, if not seconds, if you're well trained, and not having to spend hours and hours on a cushion. I mean, I love sitting on a cushion. I do that too, but I'm just saying that being able to bring yourself to the here and now, being present, is where the power is. So yes.
And what I love about this model that I'm using is I actually sat a month-long silent retreat. I don't know if you know that, but
No.
when I was going through a big transition out of one relationship, long-term relationship, I had the great good fortune to be able to take the time to spend a month in silence. And I had done many retreats before that, but this was a big one. When I agreed, I was a little nervous. It was fabulous. But I watched all of us, all 90 of us, when we completed our time together. The integration is the hardest part, or the most interesting, maybe that's a better word. And so I've sat lots of retreats, even the long one. I practiced my meditation every day, but you can do it just as fast in 2 minutes. You don't have to sit a month long.
Yeah.
It's lovely and wonderful, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
And still get the value out of it. So that's what's exciting to me about the work I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then people can stop in conflict, notice, stop, and choose a different response to the situation. And to me, that's the key of the work I do in relationship coaching.
What I just got, though, from you is the stop and the choosing is because you've developed this wider, expansive, like I just experienced when I did my fingers. You have a new place from which to come from. There is a choice
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
because it's there and available because you've got access to it. So, Linda, we're coming to an end, and I like to always give guests an opportunity to listen to this now moment as we come to a close and see what you may want to say, either about voice or about whatever your experience is today, or what you want to leave the audience. Just listen into this new now moment and see what wants to be said.
Well, there's this image that I've been playing with. It's the oyster. And the oyster has the opportunity to grow pearls, right? And to me, these challenges, like what drew me to speaking circles and finding my voice, was the grit. The grit is what makes the pearl. So if you're feeling some grit out there, and it's the grit that makes the pearl in relationship too. So when we're feeling grit, it's not a bad thing. It can actually be a really good thing. And this is why I got to meet you, Doreen, and play in this arena that I get to play in, is because I took on the grit and I worked with it. So I invite your audience to explore the grit, turn it into a pearl.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Where there is fear, there is a treasure is another saying. So, and thank you so much, Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today for this episode of Find Your Voice, Change Your Life. Each person Doreen interviews shares what has helped them find their voice. You can learn from these guests and find your voice so you can be confident to speak up and speak out. And remember to download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. We hope you enjoyed the show and will return next time. Until then, goodbye for now.